Well, good afternoon, everybody. This is Jerry Boykin. Thanks for joining me, and I want to spend a few minutes here talking about our president's speech last night on his intentions for Afghanistan. Let me say, first of all, going into last night's speech, I was skeptical about any notion of putting more troops into Afghanistan. And we had all heard the rumors that there would be another 4,000 or so American soldiers, probably Marines, and certainly some Air Force and Navy people in there. And I was concerned about that. I did not want to see us put more people in there and make bigger targets out of the Americans on the ground in there. That said, after listening to his speech last night, which I think was probably one of the best speeches that he has given since he's been the president, and after listening to that, I was more comfortable with the idea of putting additional troops in there. I'm still a little skeptical. I'm still struggling with this, wrestling with what's the right answer here, but I'm certainly more comfortable than I was last night before he spoke. And after his briefing, I thought about what he said, and I'm dealing with that a little more realistically today. Now, that said, I want to point out several things about the president's speech last night. Number one, the most brilliant part of his speech last night was that he didn't lay out his strategy for what he was going to do. And you may hear, you may look at me and say, "What? That was brilliant?" Yeah, that was brilliant. How many times did Barack Obama actually tell the enemy what we were going to do, what our timelines were, when we were coming out? And I think that it was brilliant last night for the president not to tell our enemies what we're going to do. What he did tell them, on the other hand, was that our commitment is not an endless commitment. He also told them that we're in this to win. We're not in it just to prop up your government. And by the way, we're not in it to do nation building. He said that to them. Now, what is nation building? Let's talk about that for a second. You may think that it's building roads and schools and churches and that type of thing. And that may be part of it. But the more important part of building nations or being involved in nation building is establishing governments that look a lot like the United States government. Now, this is going to surprise some of you, but democracy is not right for everybody. And when you have a society that is that primitive and that corrupt, and a society that has lived under Sharia or Islamic law, it is important to understand that you cannot have a coexistence between Sharia and democracy. When we helped them to write a constitution for Afghanistan, we started that constitution out by saying the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan. Well, from that point on, it doesn't matter what else is in there because it's meaningless. It's not a democracy. It's not a representative government. You can't have an Islamic Republic which practices Sharia and have a true democracy. It doesn't work. So part of what Mr. Trump was saying was, we're not going to try to dictate to you what kind of government you have, because part of our struggle has been establishing what looked like an American style of government, not only at the national level, but then trying to establish that in the villages where people are still very tribal, where people are, their allegiance is not to a central government, their allegiance is to the tribal leaders, to the tribe that they came from, to the tribe that their ancestors came from. And trying to do that when you don't understand the society, you don't understand the dynamics of the society, is an impossibility, and it gets you bogged down, and that's exactly what happened to America. The other thing that the president said was he talked about winning. How many times did you hear our previous president actually talk about winning? He had no winning strategy. He had no concept of winning. And quite frankly, I don't think he cared about winning. Donald Trump is a winner. He built a great empire by being a winner. And he talked about winning, and that's music to the ears of the young men and women that serve in our military, that are out there putting their lives on the line. That is exactly what they want to hear, that he's in it to win it. Now, what does winning look like? Well, that's another story altogether. I don't know what winning looks like, and I don't think the president really knows, but he understood the importance of him talking about winning, because these young men and women have been, in many cases, not supported properly in their efforts to not only defeat the enemy, but to accomplish their objectives. Okay, so what does it mean, winning? What is that? What are the components of that? Well, one is giving these troops what they need, giving them the materiel that they need, giving them the leadership that they need, but also importantly is giving them the rules of engagement that they need. And he talked about that. He said, I'm going to loosen the restrictions on you. He was talking about rules of engagement. We've had people hurt and even killed because of the rules of engagement that have been forced on them. This president understands. You take the gloves off and you let these people go out on the battlefield, find the enemy, kill the enemy, and protect themselves. I was just delighted to hear that last night. The other thing is that he did, and I thought was absolutely spot on, he called out Pakistan. He called out Pakistan for actually supporting the Taliban and even supporting Al-Qaeda. And they've been doing this for years. The Pakistani intelligence service is known to have been in cahoots with the Taliban as well as Al-Qaeda. And he's calling them out, saying, no more money. You're not going to get no more of our billions of dollars when all you're doing is playing both sides against the middle. You're taking our money, you're doing nothing in exchange, but you are supporting the Taliban, and that's got to cease. I thought that was brilliant. He also called on India to help us, the Americans, help us with the economic programs there. And that was actually intended for Pakistan, because what he was saying was, Pakistan, you're either a friend or a foe. You make the decision. And by the way, we know India is a friend, and we're calling on India to support us. And of course, India and Pakistan are major rivals. In fact, they are enemies. And in fact, Pakistan considers India to be their number one enemy, which is why they've spent a lot of the money we gave them focusing on going to war with India rather than defeating the Taliban. So I thought that our president, he talked about a lot of other things, but I thought that he gave a very good speech last night. He stayed on message. He didn't drift off and go into his ad lib. And I thought that it was, again, it was probably one of the top three. I would compare that very much to the one that he gave in Cairo, as well as the one, or I think it was in Riyadh, actually, in Saudi Arabia a few months ago. And then he gave another one, I think, to our NATO allies that was also a brilliant speech. He did well because he stayed on message. He listened to his advisors. And then finally, I think the thing that I would say is, even though I'm still concerned about adding more troops in there, I am greatly relieved knowing that our president is letting the generals and the senior leaders fight this war. He's given them broad guidance, but he's letting them make the decisions. He's not getting down to the operational or tactical level of warfare. Our president is staying at the strategic level and providing guidance to our leaders on the ground. That makes me very comfortable. We'll see what happens. We'll talk about it more as things unfold. But for now, I'm still pondering the troop levels, but I liked his speech, and I thought he said the right thing. So God bless you, and I'll try to do something else before the week's over with on this topic.